This is the Mox Team Zirconia podcast, episode 5, Brisela in the Ice.
Welcome to Mox Team Zirconia. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Colin.
And I'm Graham, and we are your hosts.
We are a podcast about Magic the Gathering for everyone.
That's returning players, pro players, new players, net deckers, brewers, tuners, everyone.
We want to get better at brewing, and we want to bring you along with us. And we want you to get inspired by our own brews, so you can make yours.
Our goal is not to be perfect, but to just make each deck better than the last one.
We recommend that you make this your goal, too.
So last week, we brewed up an awesome energy deck, and we took it for a run. But before we do, Graham, why don't you just run us through some of the key cards that really made the deck work?
Yeah, this deck was a lot of fun to play. I'm going to talk about Harness Lightning a lot today because it was awesome and it did everything that I wanted it to and so much more. Harness Lightning was awesome. I really also liked Voltaic Brawler. That was a great card.
And just to clarify, Harness Lightning is the instant for 1 and 2 red where you get 3 energy and then you get to spend as much energy as you want to do that much damage to a creature.
Right, and there was no shortage of energy creation in this deck, so I had a lot of energy. It was not just useful early game, it was useful mid-game, late game. It took out some bombs. This card was awesome. Other key cards for this deck, Attune with Aether was super useful. That's a land tutor that also gives you energy, so on your 1-drop you get 2 energy and the land of your choosing. The Eddy Trail Hawk, which wasn't in the original build, ended up being a great finisher. It allowed us to go over the top. That's a flyer that allows you to spend energy when it attacks to give another creature you control flying until end of turn.
Oh, gee, I remember recommending that card, I think.
That was a card that I was against right from the start.
That was a card that I was also against. So, point for Colin.
What inspired you to try that thing out, anyway? Was it Colin?
Well, we were talking about needing evasion and how we couldn't get our oodles of damage through, and we went back to the Eddy Trail Hawk. I don't remember how it came up while we were testing it.
I think we decided that the Aetherstorm Rock, which is the one that we had in the original list, was just more expensive than we wanted. And so trying to swap out something that was the same color that was also flying. And then it just turned out that my initial inspiration was brilliant with how it was able to get the creatures through.
We'll go with that. Fabrication Module, which wasn't in the original build either, also ended up being a very, very powerful card. That one allows you to put +1/+1 counters on creatures you control every time you gain energy. I swapped that one in for the Decoction Module, which really was not useful at all in this deck.
Right, so Decoction Module was just like...
It was the wrong... It was the wrong...
a bad version of that card.
Right, it was the wrong module.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I was just kind of into that card because it has like an infinite combo.
It does, yeah.
But I don't think we didn't have the infinite combo in the deck. So,
right.
Or did we?
No, we did not.
We did not play Whirler Virtuoso.
Yeah. Do we not have?
No.
We don't have Whirler Virtuoso in the deck?
Yeah. So, it should be noted that it should be noted that this deck was mostly Temur colors, red, green, and blue, but it did have black and white.
Nope, it wasn't Temur.
So, that's a lot.
It was mostly Naya. Red, green, white.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. So, it should be noted that it was mostly Naya, red, green, and white, and it had blue and black in there a little bit. So that's a lot of colors for a deck. Like 2 weeks ago in old standard, you couldn't run a deck anything like this. So how did it go? Did you ever find yourself with cards in your hand that you couldn't cast? Was it a pain? Did you feel like, because aggressive decks need to be able to play the cards they need right now. Like,
well,
what did you run up against?
We played a total of 10 games with it against 4 decks. And there was only one single game where I got trapped with cards in my hand I could not play. Just one. I was absolutely floored. I didn't have any trouble getting any mana that I needed at any time. It was insane.
So you had the 4 attune with ether to get you the basic lands you need,
Yeah,
and then you had the 4 ether hub,
that's right.
which gives you any color and an energy. Well, you can use the energy, and since you kept making energy, you could keep using it to get
That's right.
any color.
And we had a dork in there. We had a dork in there, but we didn't even. I never used it, so I took it out and replaced it with something that just gave me more energy, and that was awesome. I didn't end up needing my any color land dork, so I swapped in a creature that just gave me pure energy, a little bit of an energy boost, which ended up being really nice and came in handy more than a few times.
And we're not even running Evolving Wilds in the list, unless I'm mistaken, which allows you to
not.
search the library for land you need. Wow. I mean, man, it's crazy. I think 5-color decks are back, which is nuts.
True, however, I feel like if I tweak this deck, and I probably will, I'll take out black and blue and just really dial it in on those Naya colors, and then it's hopefully it'll be a great new aggro deck. This deck performed really well.
Yeah, let's talk about the record.
Yeah, so it went 3-1 against our new gauntlet, and it won a couple of those rounds in 2. Well, I take that back. It won round 1 in 2, and it essentially won. Was it round 2 in 2? However, I lost the first game due to that was the game where I ended up with cards in my hand that I couldn't play.
Gotcha.
If that hadn't happened, I would have won in 2 with no problem. This deck rolled.
Right. So I will say though, it did roll. But here's a caveat. Round 1 we played against the number 1 red-white vehicles deck from the Star City Open in Cincinnati on October 1st. And this deck, we only played the 2 games and then we moved on, but this deck just did not come out. At no point did it have enough creatures to crew the vehicles on the board, or enough vehicles to make the tiny creatures on the board useful at the same time. So the sample size for this deck was very small, but the aggro deck, which did come out and was very consistent and efficient, really did a good job taking this vehicles deck apart. And I know that other vehicle decks and like the vehicle decks have been doing great, and they're probably very strong in the format still, and they probably will be for a while. But so I just want our audience to know, so we rolled it with this deck, but that doesn't mean that that's going to happen every time. I don't feel like this is super representative of how our deck will always perform against vehicles decks, but it wasn't even close.
But I mean, the deck is very aggressive. The things like Long Tusk Cub and Voltaic Brawler are very efficiently costed 2-drops that hit really hard.
Yeah, and I would also add that.
That's right.
Yeah, and I would also add that when we played against the number 1 vehicles deck, that was before we had made any changes to the deck. So we were playing it essentially vanilla, the way we built it on last week's episode. The deck only got better and more efficient as we went through the rounds. I was continually tweaking it and making changes game by game. I made an immediate change after the first game of round 1. I think I took some land out and put in. I added some artifact removal. I mainboarded artifact removal. I think I dropped in Natural States, which is a 1-cost green spell that destroys artifacts. And I made.
And you hit a Smuggler's Copter in that one.
I did. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. So game 2 in that round was more of a real game, in the sense that you adding those control cards and your deck curving out legitimately past this deck, red-white vehicles deck.
Oh yeah.
But it did end up with just crew creatures mostly, and the couple of vehicles that it saw throughout the game you were able to destroy with your direct damage or your artifact control.
Harness Lightning took out a console flagship without breaking a sweat. So here is why I really like Harness Lightning. It's probably the most efficient bolt that I've ever used, because early game, if you use a lightning bolt to take out a 1/1 creature, well, you've just wasted 2 of those damage. The Harness Lightning, you don't have to do that. You take out you can put as much damage as you want onto the creature and you get to hoard the rest of the energy. Energy doesn't go away. It's not like mana. It doesn't disappear at the end of your phase or your step or whatever. You get to keep it for later and use it for other things. So say on turn 2, you nuke a 2/1, what's that, tool work apprentice or whatever, the toolkit, the white.
Oh, the white 1-drop that turns into a 3/2
Right.
first striker.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
something.
Say that you take him out on turn 2, and then you have two energy left over. Turn 5 rolls around, and they have their console flagship, and you need to do 5 damage to it, and you draw Harness Lightning. Boom, you got 5 energy to nuke that flagship with. This Harness Lightning card is great.
Toolcraft Exemplar is the name we were looking for. But it is interesting too. Another thing that I noticed was happening is you would use the Harness Lightning to deal 1 damage to a creature, and then you would immediately use your leftover energy to tap your Ether Hub for another color that you needed.
Or I would use it to pump my Cub, or I would use it to pump my Brawler. Because energy is so multi-useful, those energies that you're leaving behind from your Bolt are just, you get to spread the love. That card it's a freaking bargain, man.
Yeah. No, it's very strong. It's very good.
Do you have to target something? Can you just not have a target and play it?
Let's see. Let's read it closely. Choose target creature.
Okay. Can you choose to spend 0 energy?
You may pay any amount of energy. Yes, you can choose to spend 0 energy. Yeah.
In fact,
because any amount includes 0.
I think I may have done that at one point because I wanted the energy and I chose my own creature.
So yes, you can do that. You can use it as a battery.
Huh. I mean, it's kind of bad. You'd rather kill something, but I mean, if you're gonna win.
Yeah, if it's a win condition and you just need the energy, why not?
Right. It just won't get stuck in your hand. Well, I mean,
okay,
lightning bolts don't get stuck in hands either. So
you ran over the vehicles deck, partly because they were, kind of screwed, and partly because the deck's really aggressive. And then what'd you play after that?
So the next deck was the Grixis Emerge deck from the Star City Open as well. And so this one...
Oh, this deck is so cool.
Yeah, so this one utilized a lot of recursion and things with Prized Amalgam, which is a zombie that comes back into play from your graveyard if you cast another creature from your graveyard. And so the enabler for that was a new creature called Scrap Heap Scrounger, which is a artifact creature that you can pay 1 black to exile a creature from your graveyard and then return it to the battlefield. This particular deck did not play what I think is the third piece, which would have made it really perfect, which is, and of course now I'm going to forget the name, but it's your favorite run. It's like Scourge.
Eternal Scourge.
Eternal Scourge, right. So.
Oh, that's the one where you can play it from exile.
Right. So basically, the Scrap Heap Scrounger exiles the Eternal Scourge, returns the Prize Amalgam, and then you can just play the Eternal Scourge again. That's just awesome, but it didn't happen. But it was running Elder Deep Fiend, which is a big emerge creature, hence the name, and it was running Wretched Griff also, and then also for Smuggler's Copters.
Actually, your Eternal Scourge does not activate Prized Amalgam. It says specifically if it entered from your graveyard.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's just you can exile the Eternal Scourge with Scrap Heap Scrounger to return to play. Yeah.
Oh, right, because then you can play it. Oh, gotcha. I see.
Right, so with Scrap Heap Scrounger, you have to exile a creature, so in this case, it's not a downside because that's how you can play it again.
Gotcha. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
So anyway, even though this list, I would have made a couple changes, I think that it did pretty well. The deck actually, it came out a bit, but yeah, I don't think it had any trouble coming out, but I think it just got overpowered a bit.
Yeah, and we performed pretty well against it. In game 1, he got out a Scrap Heap Scrounger. And he actually had 4 Prized Amalgams in his graveyard and was just waiting for me to nuke it. But I was able to survive, and I had a lot of Cubs in that game. And those things kill it, man.
Is that the best creature?
Oh yeah, the Cubs they're a green 2/2. I believe they're a 2-drop, and you get 2 energy every time you deal damage to a player with them, and you can also at any time spend 2 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on them. So all I had to do was, which you could play at instant speed, which is really important. there were a lot of times where I had to attack with 2 cubs and wait for blockers to be declared and then pump them up with the energy, so I get the most bang for my buck. And those guys killed it, man, because you're just cranking out energy in this deck, and I don't even think we were really maximizing the energy engine. I think that if we put our minds to it, we could probably crank out a lot more energy than we were. And I may take a little bit of a closer look to that. This deck may show up in our side projects page, so stay tuned, folks.
So yeah, I mean, thinking about the long tusk cub where you want to get through, I guess that's when the Eddy Trailhawk is really cool.
I believe it was this deck where we realized that the Aetherstorm Rock wasn't getting it done. It was too expensive, and its upside was just too low. I think this is where we stopped in the Eddy Trailhawk.
Got mana starved in game 2, which really affected that. I was like, oh man, we really just don't want a 4-drop right now.
Yeah, and he was able to get his recursion engine moving in game 2 as well, and I just got whomped on by the prize amalgams. Game 3, I curved out perfectly. I could not have asked for a better come out, and I took him down by like turn 5 or something. Turn 4, turn 5. It was aggressive. It was awesome. He didn't stand a chance. It was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just an example of how having a simple, powerful plan can often beat, the sort of the more clever deck, because whatever it is they're doing doesn't really come into play when they're just kind of trying to survive.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. A lot of these strategies that people have, or that me as a Johnny have had many times, kind of rely on you being at parity on the board or being slightly ahead. And these decks that can just constantly put you behind can really affect your ability to have those kind of interactions.
Yeah, and the great thing about this deck is the most expensive cards are the dual lands. All the creatures are under 25 cents. All the spells are under $1. Wow, Harness Lightning is already up to 75 cents. Holy cow. Told you it's good.
Yeah, the Pro Tour happened. We'll be talking about that and how that affects prices a little bit too.
But
yeah.
I think Harness Lightning was pretty expensive before the Pro Tour, actually.
I can totally understand why.
People knew it was good.
Yeah, totally.
So.
Cool. So the next deck we faced was basically a new kind of ramp deck that was ramping up to Metalwork Colossus.
This deck was also very cool. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, Metalwork Colossus is an 11-drop artifact. It's a 10/10 artifact, but it costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. So if you have a bunch of artifacts that normally wouldn't be as enticing, but it costs a bit of mana, it just makes your Colossuses really cheap. So I know a couple of really good ones that came in, like Hedron Archive, which is a 4-drop artifact, and you tap it to add 2 to your mana pool. It's like double ramp because it makes your Colossus 4 cheaper off the bat, and then you tap it for 2 mana. So essentially, one card by itself brings a Colossus down to 5 mana for a 10/10, which is just crazy.
So you could go like turn 4, play the Hedron Archive, and then turn 5, play a Colossus.
Basically.
Yeah, even if it takes you that long to get to it.
Right, we were seeing Colossus much faster than that because it's also playing other cheaper artifacts too, like Prophetic Prism, which lets you draw a card, and
Puzzle Knots are really good too.
New favorite, Cultivator's Caravan, which also ramps and adds a mana. So if you play Cultivator's Caravan, and then you can get it out pretty fast. Cultivator's Caravan on turn 3, and then Hedron Archive. I don't even know if you need to do that. So if you play Cultivator's Caravan on turn 3, tap it for mana and play Hedron Archive, that brings the price of the Metalwork Colossus down enough to play them on turn 4, which is just crazy.
I think you're one short there.
Am I?
It goes, it's 7 mana is the cost of both artifacts. And then one taps for 1 and the other taps for 2, so that's 10. But the Colossus costs
Don't
11.
use your magical math on us, Dan. The point is that it came out really fast. It was impressive to say the least.
Well, but you're playing,
and there's other.
Also, and you're playing lands too. And if you played a 2-drop artifact like your Prophetic Prism, it was really fast. It was ridiculously fast.
Right. Oh no, sure. Yeah, you shouldn't be getting a 10.
You guys are missing the most important point. We still rolled it.
That's true. We did roll. Well, it
was close.
We went to game three. Because there is a card called Glint Crane, which allows you to go basically recruit the top of your library for artifacts to find Colossuses, and then was also playing Panharmonicon, which is an artifact that doubles every enter the battlefield effect. So play Glint Crane, do it twice, and then one time got to play 3 free Metalwork Colossuses in that turn for nothing.
Still won.
Colossus.
Yeah,
Colossi.
So, let me just play that out for you, or recap that for you. There were 3 10/10 creatures on the board that my opponent controlled. Still beat him.
So anyway, it was really fun. It was a fun deck to play against. It was really fun to watch it go off, and it was really fun to watch our opponent play a bunch of seemingly useless artifacts and let us hit them for 3 turns with these creatures.
Yeah, we weren't really sure what was going on to begin
yeah.
with. I didn't know what the deck was. This was the first time I'd played against any of these decks, and so it was interesting in that respect. It's kind of like a tournament style setting where I don't know what I'm getting myself into. Anyway, game 1 was pretty quick. I got Creature Starve, which is not great in an aggro deck, but he got a Metalwork Colossus and was able to cast 2 of them for 4 each. No, 4 total. And I only saw 2 creatures, so I scooped because I was done for him. Game 2, I curved out really well, and my opponent got really flooded. He still had a Colossus in play, but that Eddie Trailhawk of ours flew over him. It was pretty cool.
Yep.
Game 3.
That worked well.
Game 3 was really the most important game of that round. I got really far behind early, and he had 3 Colossus in play that he cast for 3 each. And I
think 3 total.
For 3 total.
Yeah.
3 10/10s for 3 mana. That's just ridiculous. I had blockers, and I was able to prevent myself from dying. And I also had an Eddie Trailhawk. And I was able to get a very large flying Longtusk Cub and destroy him. I basically beat him with numbers and Harness Lightning. I was able to destroy his blockers, other than the Metalwork Colossus. Strangely, they don't have reach. You would think that something that large would have reach, but I guess that's not a thing. Maybe that would just make it too ridiculous. Harness Lightning was massive. That I felt incredible after I won that game. That's the most important thing.
Eddie Trail sounds like the Hardy Boys' friend or something. That's like not quite as smart as them, but like has some info.
He's got the nature knowledge.
Yeah, Eddie Trail says that we can eat these mushrooms. It'll be fine.
Let's do it.
No, those are the ones with the red stripe. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It really puts you in tune with nature.
So, how did your last round go?
All right. Well, the last round wasn't quite so good. You want to describe the deck for our listeners, Colin?
Yeah, so this was also a top 8 Star City game, Star City Open deck, and it was the Donovan Lackney's white-red humans build. So still white-red again. We really wanted to see how this deck would do against another aggro deck. And this one was ridiculously aggro, with running handwear garrisons, which put humans on the battlefield, tapped and attacking whenever it attacks. Fleet-wheeled cruisers, which is the haste vehicle. That's a 5/3 for 4. 4 smugglers copters, just like everything else. Declaration in Stone, which turned out to be a bit devastating, I think, in this one. Running 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which is the planeswalker that's I think is probably going to see a bit of a resurgence here after dipping a bit in Eldritch Moon. And also the new Thalia Heretic Cathar, which taps down your non-basic lands and creatures and they come into play. So to sort of like win the tempo game there. And this deck just exploded.
Yeah, and to be honest, though, I didn't feel like we lost nearly as bad as it seems like when you lose in 2. So in game 1, I got stuck at 3 land, and I had a Brawler out and a Cub, but I was sitting on 2 energy for a long time. My opponent got a Gideon out, and I was able and get stabilized. I still was missing my fourth land. He popped out a nuke, he popped out a Knight, which I nuked with a Harness Lightning, which gave me an additional energy to play with. But then he got a Fleet Wheel Cruiser, and he killed me. I was at 8. I got my opponent down to 1 life, and I still lost. That's why I don't feel so bad about this round. Got him to 1, right? Game 2, got Harness Lightning used against me. Rude. And then I got a Voltaic Brawler. Really, that was just another situation where I kind of got creature starved. So like in round 1 where the really good deck didn't really develop, that's kind of what happened to me in round 4 against this humans aggro deck, which was admittedly ridiculous because at one point he had 2 Hanware Garrisons in play and was essentially attacking with exponentially larger forces. He's putting out 4 humans tapped and attacking per turn. Yeah, that was a little overwhelming. Maybe should have sideboarded in a Declaration in Stone against this deck, because that would have been really useful against all those humans. I might have been able to come back.
Yeah, we should probably just keep that in mind for sideboards pretty regularly.
That card is also awesome.
Declaration in Stone is a card that exiles a creature and any other creature on the board with the same name as that creature. And if it's a non-token creature, that's the end of story. They just all get exiled.
No, if it's
a token creature, they just get exiled. But non-token creatures, your opponent does get to investigate, which means put a clue token on the battlefield for each creature that is exiled that way. So it's much better against token decks where they don't get the extra benefit of getting the clues.
Yeah. And that's how the deck did. So it did really well overall, 3-1 against 4 top 8 decks. I am very happy with that. Dan, it was your deck. How do you feel about it?
It's my deck. You can tell how attached I was to it since I did so much testing. I figured it would do good. I mean, energy was my favorite mechanic after looking at the spoiler, and I don't know, it just seemed like a lot of the cards are efficient, especially like the little creatures. I was pretty hopeful Long Tusk Cub was going to be good, and I'm glad that panned out. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the deck has a lot of game, and I wouldn't mind bringing this deck or something similar to it to a tournament. Like, I wouldn't feel the least bit outclassed.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is definitely a prime FNM or Friday Night Magic deck because it's so inexpensive. I think if you swap in some cheaper, slower dual lands, perhaps you could build this deck for under $30 without breaking a sweat, I think.
Yeah, and it is worth mentioning though that those new fast lands are pretty amazing. The fact that it can still be your 3rd land drop and you can still play it untapped,
right,
is really big. So
the Aether Hubs are probably the most important aspect of this land base, which is a little on the more expensive side, sadly, but very much worth it. That card is going to get so much play.
Right, but it's looking like if you're going to be playing Standard a lot, you're going to be playing some of these dual lands, these new ones a lot. So, man, before they really get up in price, I would go grab them.
Sure. So based on our testing, Colin, how did you feel about, or what did you learn from some of the decks that we played against?
I learned that energy, if you can get enough of the energy synergy in your deck, it's just having that extra resource is just ridiculously good. It's just really good. And I'm wondering even like, it's probably so good that it's going to affect how I make decisions for the rest of the format. Like, okay, I want to make this deck. I want to do this. Well, how can I get energy in there? And what's the minimum number of energy cards that I need? I mean, does every deck in Standard want Aether Hub right now just to do even a little bit of fixing or do those kind of things? It's pretty crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're pretty much all playing Aether Hub. I mean, not the single color decks, but almost all.
Right. I know.
Yeah, there's no good reason not to.
Exactly. And so,
well, except that you only get the color once if you're not playing a bunch of energy cards. So.
Exactly. So that's why I was saying, like, okay, so if I have Aether Hub, man, if I just had this one other card that gives me 2 more energy, I could have 3 fixing things. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, but I'm just, and so like I can just see it like you sliding into this energy thing.
Right. Because the more energy cards you have in your deck, the more consistent all the rest of them get.
Right.
So it does seem to sort of pull you to play more and more energy cards.
Exactly. So I'm even curious to see like, okay, and maybe we can hit this in our live brew today. But like find a place where, okay, so it's not an energy deck, but it has a couple of supporting energy cards that maybe don't necessarily 100% always or seem like they fit perfectly with the theme, although it's even if we can, that's even better. But see if we can get that and just see like where that point is of, okay, so we tried it with 4 ether hubs and only 2 other cards on the whole list that create energy, and we realized that wasn't enough. Or we did it with 6 and that's too much. I'm just curious to see if we can find something where the payoff or the win condition or the idea is not energy related, but just having the energy cards as an additional resource to use when playing would make it just that much more consistent, that much better. So I'm curious about that. I think we can probably do that with this idea that we're going to come up with. But one of the things I want to talk about, because what just happened was the Pro Tour just happened in Honolulu, and I will admit I did not get a chance to look at everything super closely, but I believe Daniel had more chance. So I'm curious, Daniel, in the Pro Tour list that you saw, how much of a theme was energy in those? Did that make as much of an impression on the pros as it did on us?
Well, there were quite a few people played energy aggro decks. I think so red-green energy was 6.5% of the field, which was a significant chunk. But the defining deck of the tournament, the one that almost 19% of the field played, was the Teamer Aetherworks combo deck, which is an energy deck, and the centerpiece of the deck is this card, Aetherworks Marvel, which is a 4-mana legendary artifact, which the first text on the card isn't super important. It says, whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get 1 energy. That's not why you play it. The second ability is tap, pay 6 energy, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So a lot of these cards, like Aetherworks Marvel, where you cheat a card into play without paying its cost, don't say cast.
Yeah, hello Ulamog. Where have you been?
Right. So the deck uses this card, Aetherworks Marvel, and then it plays the cards Emrakul, the Promised End, and Ulamog,
the Ceaseless Hunger.
The Ceaseless Hunger, yes. Both incredibly expensive and powerful cards that do something when you cast them.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, the deck is a pure combo deck. You're just trying to get a bunch of energy really fast and play a Aetherworks Marvel, and then cheat one of these giant Eldrazi into play, and just take over the game that way. So you're talking about almost 20% of the field, a fifth of the decks were this combo deck. So that's what you have to look at the decks that did well. You have to look at them through that lens of having to beat this deck that's this combo deck that plays giant Eldrazi super early. So just looking at the results, the top decks were all these like white blue flyer decks, like kind of mid-rangey, spirity kind of decks with they're called, I guess, white blue flash decks, but they use things like the key cards. First of all, the card Spell Quellers, which is the 2/3 flash spirit for 1 blue white that counters a spell that's 4 or less, which just happens to be how much Aetherworks Marvel costs.
Oh yeah.
So I'm assuming that in a field that's like just flush with these combo decks, that the Spell Queller was just insane.
Yeah. I like Spell Queller. I feel like it's fragile though, because the other half of the card says that if it ever leaves the battlefield, they get that spell, they can cast it without paying its mana cost, right? So it's
right.
tricky.
But these combo decks, they don't have any removal. They're just like all in on this combo. So I mean, they're playing like terrible things like these puzzle knots, like the green puzzle knot that just gives you life and energy.
Right.
Just because it's the fastest way to get 6 energy. You play this puzzle knot on turn 2, you sacrifice it on turn 3, you're up to 6 energy, and then on turn 4 you play your Aetherworks Marvel and hope to get lucky. You don't have to get that lucky, because you look at the top 6 and there's 8 cards that basically just say win the game.
Right.
So there's a really good chance you'll hit one of them.
4 Ulamogs, 4 Emrakuls, and don't forget our good friends. I guess the Copter, the Smuggler's Copter, is in the control deck, not the Aetherworks Marvel deck.
Right, yeah. So yeah, you basically all the results you kind of look at through this lens, and I think like the winning deck was this Grixis control deck, which Shota Yasuoka played. Yasuoka. Yasuoka.
Yeah, Yasuoka.
Yeah. Shota Yasuoka. Okay. Um, yeah, and it's actually kind of a, I don't know. It doesn't. I mean, it's fine, right? It looks like a pretty standard control deck. It's got early, efficient removal and decent sweepers and decent card draw. Like, it honestly doesn't look that special to me. It just looks like a deck that was well placed to combat these combo decks that don't really do well with just like a counter spell.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you counter the Aetherworks Marvel, they're in really bad shape.
Yeah, Ceremonious Rejection becomes really, really, really good because that's the 1 blue to counter target colorless spell, because you can choose. You can counter the Aetherworks Marvel, or if you draw it after they play that, you can counter, the first big thing that comes out of it.
Oh, right. Yeah, because I mean, the Aetherworks Marvel deck can play like things like Ulamog and Emrakul. You can just play them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to use the combo. But this control deck has all these counter spells, and then it has Torrential Gearhulk to bring back the counter spells. Gearhulk being one of the new constructs, mythic constructs, the blue one that returns an instant from your graveyard to...
Which went up to $26 already, by the way.
Yeah, that ended up in a lot of the Pro Tour top 8 decks. So, Daniel, here's a question that I have about this particular Grixis control deck that maybe you can answer. There are a lot of one-ofs in this deck. There's a lot of one-ofs, a lot of two-ofs. It seems like it's like a long deck list. How does that work with only having one Ceremonious Rejection and one Essence Extraction and one Transrest the Mind and one Jace Unraveler of Secrets? How does that lend to the effectiveness of the deck?
Well, I think a lot of those one-ofs were just sort of like really good in specific scenarios. Like Essence Extraction is really good when you're just dying to an aggro deck, right? I mean, you don't want it in every situation, but I don't know. It just seems like he's kind of hedging. I don't really think I don't necessarily agree with that strategy of building decks, but I've known some really good deck builders that do that. So I think
I've noticed they've got
taste.
Yeah, they've got more copies of everything except Essence Extraction in their sideboard too. So I feel like you play game 1, you get a feel for your opponent's deck. You swap out some of your one-ofs, which then become 2 or 3 ofs of the one that is the most potent. And so maybe just making that as their main deck list, they're just trying to have the most cover the widest net for what they could see in game 1. Is that what you think?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. There's a couple all-stars that I've noticed have ended up in a good portion of these top 8 decks. What do you guys think of Weaver of Lightning? This one ends up in a lot of things.
What do I think of it in general?
Yeah, like how do you guys feel? How do you feel about that in standard play right now? It's a 1/4 shaman creature for 3. It has reach, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target creature an opponent controls.
I mean, it's pretty good against any sort of aggro deck that has Smuggler's Copter in it. So you can block Smuggler's Copter, and then you can kill the little creatures they use to activate Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense that we see it when everybody looked at the field and thought they would be seeing a ton of Smuggler's Copters. So, going into it, the Pro Tour anyway.
Yeah, what other kind of all-stars did you guys notice throughout all these decks that everybody had, aside from the obvious Smuggler's Copters, which ended up in, again, most of these decks?
As in things to watch for.
Things to watch for and things to expect, and perhaps things to include in your own brews.
I feel like we've talked about most of them, actually. I think that, cards like, the surprise ones from the Pro Tour were Aetherworks Marvel and Torrential Gearhulk. I think those are the 2 that really were like, oh yeah, and then people saw those going in. We talked about Spell Queller a little bit, which I think is another one that you really have to watch for. If someone's playing those colors, man, and they leave 3 mana up, there's so many things it could be, but Spell Queller is like... It's you got to be playing around Spell Queller a little bit, or have to. And then Harness Lightning, like, may not have seen as much play, but I still think it's just a really, really good card. And we talked a lot about that one. So, I don't know. How do you feel, Daniel?
Well, I'm just kind of looking through these decks that did well. There's this like red-white aggro deck that plays a bunch of sort of like just tokens and just little stuff. I like the plan. I mean, it seems like aggro's one cool thing about aggro is that like these blue-white decks that are designed to be good against like the Marvel decks and
Combo decks.
actually I'm not really sure what else you would want to play that blue-white deck against. I mean, I'm sure they have game against everything, but it seems like that's the only you really just crush that matchup. I mean, historically, like aggro control decks, which are like decks that put out a threat, like a little creature, and then protect that clock with counter magic, have been really good against combo decks. So that's not particularly surprising. But then they tend to lose to like aggro decks. You know, maybe the field just wasn't that aggressive.
Yeah, I think one
It was more
surprise that I have is that there's only one of the decks in the top 8 that's running Fumigate. And I'm just really surprised because a lot of the control decks that ran last rotation were running tons of Languish, which is another, it costs 2 black, and so it's a 2 of one color card. Fumigate, 1 extra mana, but a lot of upside, especially against a token deck. So I was expecting to see more Fumigate, I think. And it looks like sweepers just are not the way right now that the pros are doing it.
Well, the one thing that surprised me was, especially after the Star City Open, was the fact that it ended up being 2 control decks in the finals. Now, granted, the red-white vehicle deck made it all the way to the semis, but ultimately you had control versus control in the final match, and that really surprised me, given the high percentage of red-white vehicle decks at Star City Open.
Yeah. But I mean, if 16% of your field is combo decks, then control does really well against combo decks.
So one thing I didn't mention was that black-green Delirium, which is this mid-rangey control deck, was 10% of the field. So a very large percentage of the field. And I think that's probably what scared people away from playing the aggro decks, because the Liliana, the 3-mana Liliana Planeswalker is just so good against aggro. And I also think people knowing that Delirium deck was going to be popular, that's what Aetherworks just stomps.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't counter it, and they don't really have much of a clock. So you're playing like this threat they can't really deal with really fast. And I think that was the key. And I think that's why so many people played Aetherworks, because they expected that Delirium deck to be the most popular deck, just because it's so good against aggro. I mean, if you look at the early results, like from the Open, where aggro was just crushing people, I'm sure that's where people started with their testing. They were like, oh, this black-green Delirium deck is really good against aggressive strategies. I haven't actually tested it, so I could be completely off here, but I just think that the Liliana, what's it called? The 3-mana Liliana? The Last Hope? I just think that card's really, really good against aggro. So
I agree. Cool. Well,
anyway,
yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah, exactly. Now that we've kind of got a feel for it, and we've talked about energy, we talked about a lot of good things. So for this week, I think that we should, and I actually think that this card was in Shota's deck, which is a great way to segue in. But let's try in our brew this week to flip Thing in the Ice and return everybody's creatures to their hands and win the game. I was thinking about this deck because I don't really have a clear vision for where it should go. I'm curious to see if there's any energy payoff we can add into it. But what I really like about this is that I figured out, because I'm observant, really late, just kidding. No, I discovered that Gisela the Broken Blade is a horror, and there's actually a lot more horrors that came out with Eldritch Moon that are fun, that can really give you a benefit and stay on the battlefield when Thing in the Ice flips over, because when Thing in the Ice transforms, every non-horror creature returns to hands, and horrors return or stay on the battlefield. So I wanted to know what you guys thought about that idea.
I think that idea is really cool.
I also agree. I like it a lot. Thing in the Ice is nasty when it flips, and I've always wanted to play with it. So
Right, and 2 mana for an 0/4 to start with isn't bad against, some of the aggro decks that are coming at you. So,
yeah, it's some survivability, which is really nice.
Exactly. So the way that you flip Thing in the Ice is that you have to cast instant or sorcery spells. The Thing in the Ice enters the battlefield with some 4 ice counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you remove an ice counter. And then if it has no ice counters, you transform it. Now, an interesting thing is that it is not a May ability. When you cast your 4th spell, you must transform it. So I wasn't sure, if that would play into it or be a big deal, but just thought I'd point that out there for when we're thinking about how these are going to go. So yeah, I wasn't sure if we were wanting to go in a direction where there are maybe some creatures we don't mind returning to our hands that have good ETB effects like Reflector Mage, or if we just wanted to go straight with the the horror theme. So let's see, where should we start? Maybe just that question.
Why don't we start with? So I have an opinion about the direction.
Okay.
So maybe we should talk about that because
Perfect.
I think that's a good jumping off point. I don't think we should play any non-horror creatures.
Okay.
Let me just throw that out there, because you need to play enough instants and sorceries to flip the Thing in the Ice, and I just don't think you can afford any creatures that aren't part of the combo.
Okay.
Just because you need to play enough spells, you need to have a critical mass of spells to flip that Thing in the Ice fast.
I agree with that, Daniel. I think that horrors are important, and there shouldn't be too many of them, or there shouldn't be too many creatures. So if you're going to play a creature, it better be a horror.
Right. So
we all agree on.
Well, what horrors
plan.
do we want to consider in the deck?
Well, yeah. So that was my question. So do we feel like Gisela is a good enough top end for this one?
Oh, I'm into it.
Okay.
I think Giselle is awesome. I love that
I like
card.
Gisela as well. There are a couple lower cost horrors that I also really like.
Well, first we should talk about Gisela a little bit just before we move on. Gisela is 2 and 2 white for flying, first strike, lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, if you control her and her sister, you can morph them together, but we're not going to do that. Actually, it's meld them together. I don't think we want Bruna, though. It's a 7-drop, I think.
Yeah, she's a little more on the expensive side.
But don't we want to? And Bruna only return. Okay, so Bruna is the 5/7 that combos with Gisela, where if you have both of them in play, they fuse.
Meld.
What's it called?
They
Fuse?
meld together.
They meld
Into Brunella.
into this disgusting world-beating angel horror thing.
Right.
What's it called?
Brisela.
Brisela.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. It's exactly what it should be.
It's very Hollywood. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, but Bruna.
Mm-hmm.
I should really just look at the actual card.
Yeah, when you cast her, you can return an angel or human creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Oh, okay.
So
She can return Gisela.
Right, or
That's
anybody
all she
else.
can. Which is a good thing to return.
And noteworthy, it's not to your hand; it's directly to the battlefield. So that's good. I mean, there's a lot of cards that cost, for a 5/7 flying vigilance.
Yeah, which is good.
So maybe
good on its own.
maybe she's a one of just for who knows, right? Or
Perhaps
I don't know.
she is an angel horror, so that's important.
What do you think, Dan? Is she in or out for just one of them? One of.
I think we should play one. Just for. I mean, come on! It's Brisela. Is that the
Yeah.
meld one? You gotta give yourself a chance. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, you can return the. You'll probably get to return Gisela, which is exactly what you want to do. I mean, that's all you want to do.
I like it too because I'm not worried about the 7-drop casting cost. I think we're going to be doing a little bit of tempoing or controlling or slowing the game down to where getting to 7 should be a pretty regular occurrence.
Okay. So, do we want to talk about some more creatures, or do we want to move into our spell strategy?
There's a couple creatures that I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
2 in particular. I think Ingenious Scab is a no-brainer for this deck. And Ingenious Scab is a 2/3 zombie horror for 3, and it has prowess, which is important because we're going to be playing lots of instants and sorceries, and it also has an ability you can pay 1 island, and it gets +1, -1 until end of turn. So say you cast a couple spells for the turn, it gets prowess activated a little bit, you have a couple extra mana available, you can make it bigger until the end of turn and swing for big.
I mean, this deck's going to have a ton of instants and sorceries, so you're going to be triggering them.
Go ahead, Daniel.
It's kind of leaving me cold a little bit. I mean, just like turn 3, playing a 2/3, and it just feels like the top end. I mean, I like the thing where you bounce everything and you're not with your thing in the ice and you're not bouncing this, but man, that turn 3 where you're getting attacked by voltaic brawlers and you're just like, I play a 2/3. Like, it just feels kind of, I don't know.
That's true, because Thing in the Ice, being an 04, does die to a pumped up voltaic brawler, which is a 4/2.
Right. Well, yeah. But, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like you can do something more powerful on 3. I don't know. I'm not really excited about this. I realize that we need some horrors, and, you know, we have some. We have our Gisellas. What other... I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't be playing it. I'm just curious if what other options we have for horrors.
Well, I think Wharf Infiltrator is the other front runner, in my opinion, which is 1 in a blue for a human horror 1/1, and it has Skulk, so it can't be blocked with creatures that has power greater than it. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So you get to loot. So you get to Smuggler's Copter from the ground, basically, whenever it deals damage, and it can only be blocked by 1 power creatures. And then also it has another ability. Whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature token. So if you have this on the board and you have a Giselle in your hand or something, and you want to draw spells and you attack, you can essentially discard a creature that you don't need for a spell and get a creature on the battlefield too.
Wait, what? It's a 3/2 horror?
It's a 1/1.
It creates it.
But it creates horrors. Yes.
Oh, so those don't get bounced by Thing in the Ice either? Oh,
that's right. Yeah, those don't
so
get bounced.
cool.
Yeah.
I take it you like the Wharf Infiltrator, Daniel.
I don't know. My only complaint with Wharf Infiltrator is that I just had this vision of, like, you go...
It trades with servos.
No, actually, what I was going to say is it gets bricked by Thraben Inspector. That was
Thrabes!
the nightmare scenario. No, Thrabes! What don't you do, Thrabes? You pilot helicopters,
seriously.
you block Wharf Infiltrators.
Investigate everything you find.
I sort of feel like F&M is just crawling with Thrabes.
Okay, so maybe we're going way farther.
Well, I don't know.
Spells.
I mean, that's not necessarily. I'm just, you know, maybe we should probably still play it anyway, just because it's so cool to, like, not bounce tokens. I love that. When do tokens not get bounced? It's pretty rare. Like, if there's a thing that bounces everything.
Well, if we want to stay in blue-white for Thing in the Ice and Gisela, that's kind of kind of where we end up.
What about Eternal Scourge, Colin?
Yeah, so that's the next one to talk about was Eternal Scourge, which we were talking about this a little earlier. It's 3/3 for 3, and it's colorless. And you may cast it from exile. When Eternal Scourge becomes target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, exile Eternal Scourge. So extremely fragile. If they hit it with a creature ability, you know, anything, tap target creature, do anything like that, it gets bounced to exile, and then you have to cast 3 to play it again. It is still a horror. You could hold it in exile and just cast it when you need it if you want. But it's not my favorite. I like Wharf Infiltrator better.
Do you like it better than Ingenious Scabs?
I don't know. I kind of feel like Ingenious Scab, even though Dan's not super hot on it, I feel like if the dream happens, which isn't that hard in a deck full of spells, where you play your 1 or 2 mana spell on turn 7 or 8 or whatever to flip Thing in the Ice, and you have the Scab in play, and then you just pump it with the rest of your mana to get through a bunch of damage. Like, I just think it's good, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it feels like a potential kill shot to me.
He's turning it sideways. It's a kill shot.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I'm not as into Eternal Scourge.
I guess I don't have a problem with, like, a few scabs, or is it scab or scob? It looks like
I
scob.
don't
Like
know.
Maybe
I
it's
want it
scab.
because isn't the car called a Saab?
The car is called a Saab.
But this
yeah.
isn't Swedish or Danish or whatever crazy Scandinavian language that is. This is
Innistrad.
yeah. This is Innistradian. I don't think that's a thing.
Graham, it's not Innistrad. It's Innistrad.
No, if it's scab, then it is Innistrad. Do we want it to be Innistrad?
Whatever.
I think we'll go with Scob. As deck master for today, I've made my decision.
Maybe we can each choose one. Like it'll be like Graham is Team Scab. Scabs are gross.
It's a freaking zombie horror, man. Zombie horrors are gross.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. The grossest possible pronunciation makes sense for yeah. I see where you're going. I don't know. I think I'm gonna keep saying Scab though, just because I like this. I like Sob. I thought that was cool. Oh yeah, we're doing a deck building thing,
Hey, welcome back.
and we're here.
Where's here, Daniel?
Yeah. Well, can we talk about? Can we move on for a little bit because I mean we'll be playing a few of Scabs or Wharf Infiltrators. I guess that's fine. But can we talk?
Yeah, let's fill it out once we get the spell package going.
Yeah, let's start talking about spells because that's more important than these last few creatures. I think the important thing is the 4 thing in the ice and the 4 Giselles. That's the core, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got that like funsies Bruna to live the dream. So I'm just gonna talk about like a couple spells to like interact and not die early on. One card that's really impressed me from Kaladesh is the white instant. It's impressed me so much I can't remember what it's called. No, it's the white instant Sky Whaler Shot, which is 2 and white for an instant. It says destroy target creature with power 3 or greater, scry 1. So it destroys Smuggler's Copter, which is usually a good litmus test for a removal spell.
Or at least so we thought. Now
Yeah.
it's, now, does it destroy Ulamog on turn 4? That doesn't matter. That was a joke. It's fine.
Oh, okay, cool. We almost all of our we have this thing in the ice. That's how we deal with Ulamog, I guess. So, except they kill thing in the ice with yeah. All right. Anyway, yes, I want some Sky Whaler shots. I'm actually just looking at this deck that went 9-1 the Pro Tour for inspiration because they main deck Sky Whaler Shot and Negate. And I think Negate's pretty good in this format
I
too.
really like negate for
Because-
this deck as well.
Even the aggro decks are playing Smuggler's Copters and removal spells and stuff. So
Or
like
tune with
the-
Aethers
or like the white-
something of that nature.
the white aggro deck is playing the Servo Exhibition, the sorcery that makes 2 servos.
That actually could be a very useful card in our deck as well. It takes a counter off of Thing in the Ice, and it provides us with 2 lovely blockers.
Oh yeah, you make a good point there. That would be a good early
That's
play.
definitely something to consider.
So what was the name of that card?
Servo Exhibition?
Well, the one downside to those is that they aren't horrors. Ugh.
True, but they're going to be blocking fodder. Anyway, the real downside to those is that they're just 1/1s, and so if somebody is rolling over us with one of those shiny vehicles that has trample, or with our voltaic brawler, there's still going to be a lot of damage that gets through. That's the major downside that I see. And in response to your Sky Whalers shot thing, I would like to submit a solid 1-drop for consideration for this deck. It's called Select for Inspection, and it costs 1 blue, and you can return target tapped creature to its owner's hand and scry 1. So it is conditional in the sense that a creature has to be tapped in order for it to work, but it works at instant speed, so all you have to do is wait for your opponent to declare blockers in order to deploy it.
Graham, are you and I always going to be at odds about bounce spells?
I really hope so, because that makes for great conversation.
Because I feel like you like bounce spells way more than I do. Like the only time I like bounce spells is when I'm trying to kill someone and their blockers are in the way. And even then I'm kind of like, do I really want this? Because I hate that feeling where you're getting it out of the way, but it'll be back.
Well, see, and I love the feeling where you know that they're getting frustrated because they have to replay their creature all over again. I like it even better with Royal Spout because they know that they're not going to get anything new in their hand. They're stuck with what they've already got because they're going to draw it off the top of their library again.
Wait a second. Royal Spout's a completely different matter because that doesn't go to their hand. That goes to their library. I'm fine with that.
It's a bounce spell.
Yeah. I consider a bounce spell to be something that puts a card back in someone's hand.
The point is, though, it clears it from the battlefield. It slows down your opponent's ability to build up whatever combo or board state that they need in order to achieve victory. And it takes a counter off of Thing in the Ice. It only costs 1 land and allows you to scry. It's very efficient. Does a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm in on Royal Spout. I don't think I'm in on Select for Inspection.
Wait, is Royal Spout in Standard?
Yeah, certainly is. It's Battle for Zendikar.
Oh. Was that one of the cards you were presenting for inspection?
It was eventually going to make it into the conversation.
Oh, man. We're totally ruining the suspense here.
Well, we've already talked about it, and it's already been greenlighted by our deck master for the day.
That's right.
Oh, deck master, you're into it? You're into Royal Spout?
I'm into Royal Spout, yeah.
There's another card that I kind of want to talk about that might be interesting in specific circumstances. It might not necessarily be a main board spell, but it could be devastating used correctly. It's called Dazzling Reflection, and if someone's trying to go big at you over the top with perhaps like a prowess deck, and they get their 25 damage kill shot in, and you've got a Dazzling Reflection sitting in your hand, you can gain life equal to target creature's power for 2 and prevent all damage that creature would do the next time, which would be super useful if someone empties their hand on a combo kill shot.
It's definitely useful, but even against like an Ulamog, Emrakul, Aetherworks Marvel deck, I mean, it only works once, right? And then they've still got the creature on the battlefield. So I definitely see it, but I think in this deck it probably goes straight to the sideboard.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Because yeah.
Ooh, I got another one gleaned straight from the Pro Tour. This is in more than one deck. The card is Immolating Glare, which is a 1 and a white instant, and it just very simply says destroy target attacking creature.
Yes, this is a great card. I also had this one prepared for today because it's a 2-drop removal spell, which is always a good thing.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel like this will be in the deck much more often than you are going to want Dazzling Reflection.
Oh, absolutely. I was not presenting Dazzling Reflection for the main board. I just kind of wanted to talk about it.
Oh, was that like an anti... What was Dazzling Reflection meant to be a counter?
Like a prowess style deck, or even like an aggro energy deck where they pump up their creature really big for 1 hit.
Okay. Well, I mean, it just seems like... So you would go the 4 full Immolating Glares and then maybe add Reflection, is that what you're saying?
Perhaps, yeah. Or something else. I mean, even Declaration in Stone is pretty good.
Well, I want to say I prefer the blue... What was the blue bounce spell called? Select for Inspection?
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer that to the Dazzling Reflection, which gives you an idea of how much I like Dazzling Reflection.
And I'll repeat, I was not presenting it for the main board.
Oh, okay. Right.
Anywho...
So...
What do you guys think of a spell? And Daniel, I already know you're not going to like this spell because it doesn't affect the board. What do you think of a spell like Pieces of the Puzzle? It's a sorcery that costs 3 and allows you to reveal the top 5 cards of your library and put up to 2 instant or sorcery cards from among them into your hand and the rest in the graveyard.
Wait a second. When did I ever say I didn't like cards that don't affect the board?
Well, we just had, I guess we assumed because of your spike.
Oh, but there's lots of cards that... I mean, this is a draw spell, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Like, yeah. So you're hoping that you'll draw 2 spells. Okay, wait. I'm saying this really dumb.
You look at the top 5 and you can pick 2, right?
Right.
That's the idea.
Assuming there are 2... Is it instants or sorceries?
That's correct. And I figure in a deck that runs off of instant or sorcery spells, this might come in handy. So essentially, you're taking... If you have a Thing in the Ice in play that you played on turn 2, turn 3, you play a piece of the puzzle, you take a counter off of your Thing in the Ice, and you put 2 more spells into your hand that will alternatively take counters off of Thing in the Ice.
What other options do we have that kind of do similar
Oh,
things?
there's plenty of draw mechanics right now. Even a spell like Comparative Analysis, which is 3 and a blue instant for target player draws 2 cards. You can also search cost it for 3. So if you play a 1 drop counter spell or even select for inspection, you can cast Comparative Analysis for 3. There's Catalog, which has been pretty popular. Actually, let's talk about Glimmer of Genius, because Glimmer of Genius is a spell that I saw pop up all throughout the top 8. It was in probably 3 or 4 of the decks, and it takes us back to our can we produce energy question. So Glimmer of Genius is an instant spell that costs 3 and a blue, and it says scry 2, then draw 2 cards. You get 2 energy.
That's a lot of things.
It's a lot of things for a little bit of mana, but it is lots of things.
Right. This does tie in with the, do we have energy to use or spend or whatever we want to do? Like, and is it worth it to have that energy?
Well, what do you say?
I say that if we're really all in on the only horrors thing, we might not be able to. If we're okay playing another creature or something, like if we really want the ether hubs for mana fixing, then yes, it would be worth it to throw a couple of these in there. I think also, if that's the case, then we might also, remember when I was talking about how adding an energy card is like a slippery slope that like leads you to more energy cards? Like, ooh, what if I add this or this or this? Because if we did put that card in there, then we could put creatures in that we actually wouldn't mind getting bounced, like Thriving Turtle, which is a 1 island for an 0/3 that gives you 2 energy when it enters the battlefield. And you can pump it up if it ever attacks. But, obviously if you're using energy for things and you bounce and Thing in the Ice returns it to your hand, not a big deal. You play it again for 1 mana, you get your 2 energy back. And then there was also a another 1-drop creature that's a 1/2 called Master of Inquiries, which is the tap to use energy. Oh, nope, that's not the one I was thinking of. That's the mill one. There's a scry one. Where did he go? Okay, there it is. Ether Theorist. When Ether Theorist enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy. So once again, getting energy for playing him for not much. And then you can tap him and pay an energy to scry 1. And he's a 1/3.
Is he a horror?
He's not a horror. That's the thing. So like these ones that give you energy went to the battlefield, you're out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. It was just an idea, because if you don't really mind them getting bounced by a Thing in the Ice if you can play them and get your energy back, and if they can scry and give you the cards you need throughout the game, I think that's good. But that's okay.
I feel like if it's not a spell, it's got to be incredible. That's sort of my viewpoint here. Like, I don't want any kind of okay stuff that it's a spell. Just because I want those things to flip. My God, they're so good when they do. A 2 mana 7/8 that bounces everything. Like that's
pretty ridiculous.
It's so unfair.
Yeah, it's a little absurd.
And can usually attack that turn too, because it's been on the battlefield for at least a turn. Usually, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I want. That's all I want to do. Is just flip those.
Okay, guys.
Those things.
Okay,
Well, keep slinging spells at me
Colin,
then.
how do you feel about Not Forgotten for this deck?
What is Not Forgotten?
Not Forgotten is a 2-cost spell. It's 1 and a white that says put target card from a graveyard on the top or bottom of its owner's library. Also, you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So, essentially, it allows you to take something from your graveyard and retrieve it, as well as you get a 1/1 flying blocker, which blocks a Smuggler's Copter, and very important.
What is it? What types can you play?
Any type.
Oh, okay.
Put target card from your graveyard.
And it's a sorcery?
Any card.
Sorcery, so it takes counters off of Thing in the Ice. If you have a shiny spell that you wish you had back in your graveyard, you can. So you can put another removal or counter that was in your graveyard. Perhaps you lost a Spell Queller to a Bolt, or you lost a Reflector Mage to a Bolt, and you wanted it back again. You could have that, plus a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying for 2.
Right. Well, I'm confused why I use those examples because I don't think we're going to play either of those cards. But if you did end up losing or needing to block with a thing in the ice and losing a thing in the ice, you could put that back on top of your library.
That as well.
I'm on the fence because the spirit gets bounced. That's a problem.
Spirit does get bounced. At that point, you don't really care if your spirit gets bounced, though, right?
I care about the spirits.
Does the 1/1 does it trade with anything? Is there like
Yeah,
one
Thopters.
toughness? That doesn't trade. That's a chump block.
Wharf Infiltrator.
I mean, it prevents 3
No,
damage.
no,
That's
not
true.
Copter. Thopter tokens.
Oh yeah. Who makes? Oh, I guess that Pia and Alara makes it.
Yeah, and there's one guy in Kaladesh who makes Thopters. I don't remember who it is. I was really disappointed with the lack of Thopters in Kaladesh.
Me too.
But I digress.
I'm not that excited about this card. I do like Glimmer of Genius though. Are we playing? Are we playing any of those? Those seem pretty nice.
Sure, I can put 2 of those in there, and it seems like if that's the case, then we should probably play some Ether Hubs. Wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
Ether Hubs. Everyone seems to be playing Ether Hubs. Even the two color decks are playing Ether Hubs, I think. And really, oh no, maybe not. Huh? Maybe people aren't playing. Yeah, maybe less people are playing than I thought. Any 3-color deck obviously plays it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, are there any white spells that use energy that would be useful?
That's a good question. Perhaps we should check Gatherer.
I can't think of any. The only 2 white spells that I can think of that take advantage of energy are the Eddy Trail Hawk and the Aether Storm Rock.
Well, those are creatures, though. Yeah.
Well, there's other creatures that use it, but I can't. No, right. I can't think of any spells. Ooh, Confiscation Coup.
Yeah, are we going too far down the energy rabbit hole though?
Oh, that's
Confiscation
interesting.
Coup.
I don't know. Maybe
The Confiscation Coup could backfire because once we take control of a creature, if it's not a horror, it gets bounced to its owner's hand.
Oh yeah, that's so true. All right, you've convinced me, Graham. I don't. As much as I like Confiscation Coup, maybe we shouldn't be playing it in this deck.
Do we want to run any counter spells in this deck? Void Shatter.
I think we.
Void Shatter seems
should.
like a good option, considering how much artifact retrieval and creature retrieval is in this standard right now. This rotation, exiling it is a great way to go. Turn aside. Oh, not excuse me. Spell Shrivel also has that potential.
Yeah. I like counter magic. Like I already vouched for negate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We could also play Ceremonious Rejection.
Yeah, I think that warrants the main board.
Okay. What's the other one you were mentioning?
Void Shatter. It's 1 and 2 blue. It's a devoid spell, counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Alternatively, Spell Shrivel costs 2 and a blue for a devoid counter spell that is. It has a condition. It counters unless its controller pays an additional 4, which is quite a bit, and then it exiles instead of going into graveyard if the spell is successfully countered.
If we're gonna play a blue counter spell that gets worse later in the game, and by that I mean it's possible that it won't be able to counter a spell you need to late in the game, then I think better than Spell Shrivel would be Revolutionary Rebuff, which is 1 in a blue, and it says counter target non-artifact spell unless its controller pays 2. I guess the non-artifact caveat's a little bit of a pain.
Right,
but...
and really I was only submitting Spell Shrivel as an alternative to Void Shatter if we think that the 2 blue would be problematic. In a 2-color deck, I'm not super concerned about not being able to produce 2 blue, especially if we have the Aether Hubs. Yeah, that was really my only... Normally, I would say the Void Shatter is just better than Spell Shrivel.
Oh, the other thing is that Clash of Wills might be actually just better than Revolutionary Rebuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the 1 blue X.
I thought that was in Origins.
No, I believe that's...
Isn't Clash of Wills in Origins?
Battle for Zendikar. Is it? Oh, maybe it isn't.
Oh, does Clash of Wills not exist anymore?
Origins.
I'm pretty sure it's
it wasn't Origins. Never mind.
Right.
Good.
Okay, well, how about as a fun... This could be an awesome spell, or it could just be useless. How about Insidious Will, which is a instant for 2 and 2 blue. You can choose one. You can either counter target spell, you can choose new targets for target spell, or you can copy target instant or sorcery spell and choose new targets for the copy. It's a little expensive, but it has a lot of really fun upside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not against maybe trying out one of.
Yeah, and also
I'm not really.
Yeah, I'm really in if the copy that you get on this takes another counter off of Thing in the Ice. Does it?
I'm not sure it does, because Thing in the Ice says whenever you cast it.
Copying doesn't count as casting?
Not as far as I'm aware. If I'm wrong, that changes a lot of my understanding of the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I feel like in Oracle text land, they would say, and you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, or it's a copy of another one.
Cast
or
a copy of it without paying its...
Yeah.
I don't believe copying casts it. So maybe it's not quite as good. It could be really fun, though. Someone tries to harness lightning your newly minted Awoken Horror for 6, you can just turn it right back around in one of their creatures.
Yeah, I think there's a couple spots for it in the deck, but I don't think it's a 4 of.
Yeah, it's a 1 of, or maybe at most a 2 of. It's a 4-drop counterspell, so it's not exactly something high in demand.
But it gives you choices, and choices are always more powerful than they seem when you're just looking at the cards. So yeah, I think it's good.
It's about choice. Ooh, I just had a cool horror. I didn't know this card existed until just now. Well, I mean, I did, but I forgot about it. Which is Docent of Perfection.
Yeah, I actually found Docent of Perfection as well, and I decided against it for a couple reasons. One being that human wizards get bounced by Thing in the Ice, and...
Wait. Hang on a second. Oh, it makes human
Right,
wizards.
so Docent of Perfection is an insect horror, but it pumps out human wizard tokens, which is what you need to flip it. And when it flips, it's no longer a horror either. So so basically, you're just paying 5 for a 5/4 flying, which isn't really that good, especially since we've got a bunch of Gisellas running around.
Thanks for doing the hard work that I refuse to do.
That's what I'm here for. I think it's only fair you shoot down all of my suggestions. So.
Oh no, that was an excellent shoot down. I don't. It was just so clean. I don't even feel rebuked. I feel like things are right.
Would you feel like that was ceremonious or unceremonious?
It was unceremonious. It was yeah. That was clean. That's clean.
Cool.
All right. Well, are we close?
Where are we, Colin?
I feel like we have a lot. Yeah. So I'm just monkeying with numbers here a little bit. I think that 12 creatures is probably where we want to be.
I have one last card, and I'm not sure how well this fits into the deck, but it could be really fun. What do you guys, because the colors fit, what do you guys think of Dovin Ban?
Oh, the Kaladesh Planeswalker?
Yeah.
I think he's not instant or sorcery.
Well, he can...
What does it do?
Give a creature -3/-0 and prevent it from activating its activated abilities until your next turn. It gives it +1. You can -1 to draw and gain 2 life, which is very nice. Or you can -7 to get an emblem that says your opponents can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap steps.
That will never happen, but that's fine.
Why not? We're playing a slowish, control-y deck.
No, we're playing a deck that tries to get Thing in the Ice flipped over as fast as possible, right?
Okay, you're probably right about that. I just thought it would be fun because of the colors.
I'm not completely out on this. I mean, Thing in the Ice doesn't... I mean, it's a permanent that Thing in the Ice does not return to your hand, so it's not any worse than, like, a horror.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like it better than the other horrors we've been considering for inclusion. Like, I like it better than Scob and Wharf Infiltrator, I think. It's another way to... Yeah, but it doesn't flip the Thing in the Ice. Ugh. I don't know. I might be down for a 1-of, though. I think it's powerful enough that it might be cool.
Okay. I'm willing to put one of them in there.
We've made a discovery. Colin will put any 1-of in a deck. It's almost like you just get it for free.
Colin, put a Thraben in. Just one. He belongs in every deck.
Normally, I would be like, I'm all about it.
Colin could be like, I'm completely against this. It doesn't work with the deck at all. I don't even understand what you're thinking there. And you could just be like, just do 1 of them. And be like, oh, okay.
Because you'll never see it. I mean, I don't know. One of my favorite decks that I've been playing recently has 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikars in it. And the last 20 times I've played the deck, There's 2 of them, and I've never seen him the entire time. So one of them, like, yeah, sure,
But that was
whatever.
wasn't that a card you really wanted though?
Yeah.
See, it only works for cards you really want. If you don't ever want to draw it, then you will draw it every game. It's like the Murphy's Law.
That's why I always draw Gideon when I'm playing that deck, because I never want him.
Wait, what would the Magic equivalent of Murphy be? We'll have to think about this for next time.
What is
Murphy anyway?
Who's
like what?
Naren the Wary or whatever? Norin the Wary.
Norin's Law. Yeah, that's pretty good. We didn't even have to wait a whole episode. And you came up with a really good answer.
Or Squee. Squee was always
Squeeze Law. Well, what I can't remember what the law was. Oh yeah, if you have a 1-of in your deck, and you don't want to draw it, you'll draw it every game.
You will draw it. Okay,
Squeeze Law.
I lied. I do have one last spell, and I already think that it's gonna get vetoed just because it creates zombies and not horrors. But in the event that your things in the ice just keep getting removed and you can't go tall, what about Arise from the Tides? You're playing all kinds of instants and sorceries, your graveyard's filling with them. It'd be sweet to drop like 10 2/2 zombie tokens.
Are they zombie horrors?
They are not zombie horrors.
I'm out.
All right, Dan's out.
Yeah, I'm putting it in the sideboard though, because I think that's true. Like in a deck with a lot of removal, you might want to board that in as an alternate win condition. If they really focus on your thing in the ice, they can be feeling really good about themselves, taking care of your thing on the ice, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh hey, by the way, look, zombies. Zombies for everybody.
Actually, but that same
it's like Oprah, and you get a zombie, and you get a zombie.
That same logic could work for the Docent of Perfection. I know I unceremoniously just
Except for that's a creature though.
rejected it. That's okay, but it makes them split their attention. They can either keep taking out your things in the ice and letting your insect and let you populate tons of human wizards that eventually become flying and nasty big ones, or they can take out your Docent of Perfection and allow your thing in the ice to flip.
True. Okay, I'll put one of them in the sideboard.
Yes,
To stay on
just one
on character here.
Okay, Colin, can you recap and tell us where we're at on this deck?
I sure can. So, right now, we are at 60 cards. So, exactly. So, 12 creatures. 1 Bruno the Fading Light, 4 Gisela the Broken Blade, 1 Ingenious Scob, 4 Thing in the Ice, and 2 Wharf Infiltrators. And then we've got 1 Planeswalker, 1 copy of Dovin Bond. Then instants, we have 23 instants, which I'm feeling pretty good about that because I think sorceries are not as good in this case. 3 Ceremonious Rejections, 2 Glimmer of Genius, 3 Immolating Glare, 2 Insidious Will, 2 Negate, 2 Revolutionary Rebuff, 4 Sky Whaler's Shot, and 4 Void Shatter. And then what I'll probably do is, and then sorcery is 2 Royal Spouts. So what I'll probably do is add 1 or 2 of these to the sideboard that have 2 ofs. So if you want more negates or if you want more revolutionary rebuffs, you can swap them out for game 2 to get the better package that you want.
Can I make a request?
Yes.
It feels like the mana curve's a bit high in this deck. Like it feels like there's a lot of 3s and 4s.
I actually thought that too, and then I looked at it. It's 27% 2-drops. There are 14
2-drops.
And there are 11 3-drops. And there are 9 4-drops.
So some of the... Yeah. I'm just wondering if we could like cut some of the like expensive like removal spells and counter spells and or just like replace them with anticipates or something.
Oh, that would be the Glimmer of Genius would be your best one. I would still stump for the pieces of the puzzle, considering how many instants and sorceries we're running.
I'm just thinking because just to give it more cheap cards.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I mean the anticipates because pieces of the puzzle is 3.
I'm adding anticipate. Yeah. So yes, this I can do for you. I can get 2 anticipates in there. Remove 1 Glimmer of Genius.
Maybe like a Sky Whaler Shot or something, or like a Royal Spout, or I don't know, one of those.
Well, we have. Yeah, I can take a Sky Whaler Shot out, and I think Anticipate's just going to be good for thinning out for exactly what you want. So I feel like I can also take out an Insidious Will and be okay. Okay, so we will refresh here on our tapped out screen. Okay, so now we're down to 16 2-drops, but we're down to 10 3-drops, and we've replaced them. We've replaced a 3-drop and 2 4-drops with 3 1-drops. That was a lot of the word drop, but we made everything cheaper, so I think that's a good call. So, cool. All right. I'm good with this. We'll run it through the gauntlet, and we'll see how it goes. I'm curious to see if we want more Dovin Bonds, if we want to see him more. I'm curious to see if Daniel is correct and Wharf Infiltrator is useless. We shall see.
Depends on how many Thrabes.
I'm looking forward to it. That's right. Depends on how many Thrabes and how many servos we face.
Are you gonna add Are you gonna add the combo deck to the gauntlet?
Oh, we probably should.
Yeah, I feel like I should.
Yeah, the 8th.
Yeah, I feel like we will adjust our gauntlet to Pro Tour decks now instead of these frilly Star City Open decks. Yeah, no, we will have a Pro Tour gauntlet, and I think that we will just keep continually updating our gauntlet so that we are trying to approximate the most recent metagame that we have access to as we go. So I think that's a good way to do it. Okay, so that is our deck. Were you inspired to create your own? Do you agree with Graham and not Daniel? I want to try out Graham's version of the deck. Do you want to add all those fun energy creatures in that I wanted to add in that got shot down because they're not horrors? I think this deck has some really good opportunities for branching off in different directions and flipping that thing in the ice, which is the goal. And so go out and try it. Let us know what you think. Let us know how it went, and find us on Twitter.
Yeah, and remember, guys, this is a deck that you can take to Friday Night Magic with, and you can show it off to all your friends there and see how good it is. It's where you can find out whether it is good or not, and hopefully it is, and you won't come back and yell at us online. But it's a great way to test it out, and you should totally do that, or even take it to your local metagame, play it with your friends.
We apologize if you lose rounds, but the point is to improve it. Just take stuff out, put stuff in, and to get better at just kind of tuning decks.
Right, because we're not there yet either, and that's okay, because everybody's learning together on this podcast. Anyway, that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Tell all your friends. Get excited. We'll be posting YouTube videos with audio for each episode for people who prefer that.
So hit that like button. It really helps us out a lot.
And let us know what you think in the comments. You can do that directly on our YouTube page at Mox Zirconia. You can send us a tweet on Twitter at Mox Zirconia. You can email us at moxzirconia@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Tapped Out, where we are at Mox Team Zirconia.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.